Captain Midnight.
So, this was not an easy video to write. With all apologies to the Nolan Batman movies, the Spider-Man film series is always the superhero franchise that I personally love the most. So sitting down to rank all of these movies was really difficult, but a lot of fun too. So without any farther introduction, here is my ranking of every theatrically released Spider-Man film from worst to best.
Hey, Electro! Who's got the power now?
Spider-Man 2, enter Electro.
Number 6, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I'm gonna let my fanboy flag fly a little bit here and say that I don't hate any of these movies, not even this one. With that being said, Amazing Spider-Man 2 is a giant mess. Everything fun or enjoyable about this movie comes from how great the web swinging sequences are, or how fun the flirtatious chemistry between the leads is. The script itself, yikes. Honestly, Sony should be ashamed of itself for letting this thing out the door. It's such a bizarre mixture of clashing tones, featuring 3 villains that feel like they're in 3 different movies. Is this movie about figuring out what happened to Peter's parents, or the angsty Harry Osborn dealing with his father's death and transforming into a monster himself? Oh, maybe it's about Peter dealing with the implications of his promise to Gwen's dad not to see her anymore. That's brought up here and there, so maybe— wait a second. This is about Jamie Foxx falling into a vat of eels. Wait, what's the Sinister Six stuff? I don't— What? This movie is about absolutely everything, so it's really about nothing. Some actors are in Saturday morning cartoons, others think this is a movie about loss and moving on. Also, Peter is a giant creep who stalks his ex-girlfriend after explicitly promising her dying father that he wouldn't see her anymore because it put her in danger.
Have you been following me?
Just once a day. Sometimes.
Why do we like this guy again? That opening Spider-Man scene though, pretty cool. Number 5, The Amazing Spider-Man. Now, I know there's a lot of people that would rank this above Spider-Man 3. When it came out, I would have been one of them. Amazing Spider-Man is a far more coherent film than the last Raimi movie, and the leads have a lot more chemistry than Maguire and Dunst ever did. But man, on rewatch, Spider-Man 3 is just a lot funner to watch. Now, Amazing Spider-Man has its moments, and I really like the cast. Director Mark Webb, who was also responsible for the indie romantic comedy 500 Days of Summer, went out of his way to deliver a movie with down-to-earth, naturalistic acting and dialogue. And it's in the exchanges between Peter and Gwen and Peter and Aunt May that this movie shines. Everything else, though, is kind of as paint-by-numbers as you can get in a superhero movie. The Lizard does not get his due here. Curt Connors is never very well established as a character, and his transformation isn't the tragic fall of a great mentor and a great man like it is in the best Lizard stories. He's kind of just there. Then he runs off to do what else? Shoot a giant laser into the sky. Nothing memorable or interesting here, aside from one kind of fun fight scene in Peter's school. And then there's Peter himself. I like Andrew Garfield as an actor, but there's just something off about the way his Peter Parker is written. Maybe it's the scene of him skateboarding to Coldplay, I don't know. There's just, I don't know, something unlikable about him. Especially his Spider-Man, who comes off as so smug at times that I was kind of rooting for the giant lizard. It's not all bad though, and at least it gave us Emma Stone's Gwen Stacy. By the way, Sony, just give us a Spider-Gwen movie with Emma Stone. I know it won't make any sense with current continuity, just do it anyway.
It's Spider-Man and the Incredible Hulk from the Elastic Superhero Collection.
I can beat that.
You can
Number 4, Spider-Man 3. I mean, what can I say about Spider-Man 3 that hasn't been said already? This movie is really goofy and has a similar villain problem as Amazing Spider-Man 2. It's pretty well known at this point that Sam Raimi had no interest in Venom and was forced by Sony to put him in the movie, and it shows. It's hard to imagine a blander or less inspired version of the character. The Sandman story has some problems too though, and the retcon of Sandman being involved in Uncle Ben's murder feels really lame and contrived. Poor Harry Osborn's arc is pushed to the back burner, which is too bad because him being the main antagonist seems like it would have been the most satisfying way to wrap up this series. Oh, plus Kristen Dunst looks so painfully bored. Like she couldn't wait to get out of this role and play depressed women in art house movies forever. And it's hard to blame her when you look at what she's given to do here, getting kidnapped once again. So why did I rank this movie higher than Amazing Spider-Man? Honestly, it's just a lot more interesting. As much as everyone likes to make fun of the emo Peter scenes or the dance club scene, I mean, at least you remember them. And the movie knows they're funny too. It has a lot of that Raimi campiness and charm that I miss in modern superhero movies. I kind of love that Peter Parker is such a dorky guy that dressing like this and doing a Saturday Night Fever strut around town is his version of being evil. It's so dumb, but it kind of makes sense. Is Spider-Man 3 a good movie? No. But I think it's a highly watchable one. Plus it gave us enough memes to last a lifetime. Number 3, Spider-Man. Now this is a good movie. Blade and X-Men may have begun the Marvel movie craze, but Spider-Man is the film that kicked it into high gear, shattering box office records and becoming a legitimate cultural phenomenon. Spider-Man is kind of the ideal version of the superhero origin story. It feels very grounded in comparison to a lot of later superhero movies. Sure, it's got a great villain, a great score, and a ton of memorable moments, but it's the little things that set Spider-Man apart. I feel like no one talks about him anymore, but I love the casting of the late great Cliff Robertson as Uncle Ben. He takes what could have been a very boring, thankless role and turns him into a three-dimensional person. His lesson about responsibility to Peter has been so repeated and joked about through the years that it feels almost trite. But man, does Robertson sell it. And when he dies, it hits hard. And you really buy that Maguire's Peter Parker would try to live the rest of his life guided by his uncle's words. But it's not all death and big speeches. Sam Raimi, indulging in his goofy Evil Dead roots, gives Willem Dafoe plenty of space to go big with Norman Osborn. I absolutely love the Thanksgiving dinner scene where he's just dripping with hate and madness, and Aunt May is having none of it. Very importantly though, Raimi never lets this element of the movie fall into pure camp like he did in Spider-Man 3. Dafoe plays it a bit over the top in some places, but that's counterbalanced by well-written scenes between him, Harry, and Peter that make him more than just a mustache-twirling villain. I also have a lot to say about Tobey Maguire's version of Peter Parker, but I'll get back to that in a second.
I give up.
That's funny. I give up too. I give up trying to be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Number 2. Oof, okay, so this was hard. The number 2 spot kept me up at night. Like, I wish I was joking, but seriously, I was laying in bed debating which one would go here. Ultimately, I settled on Spider-Man Homecoming. If you watch this channel, chances are that you've seen me talk about this movie before. But to put it simply, this is my favorite version of Spider-Man ever put on screen. As much as I love the first 2 Raimi movies, the webhead himself always felt a little stiff to me. Maguire never looked comfortable cracking one-liners, and when he tried, it rarely turned out well.
It's you who's out, Gobby. Out of your mind.
The CG is also understandably spottier in the older films, especially the first. All of that is fixed in Homecoming, and we finally get the Spider-Man up on screen that I always wanted. We also get a great villain, a fun supporting cast, and a very solid script. There's not much I can say about Homecoming that I haven't said in the past, but to summarize, Homecoming is one of my favorite films in the entire MCU and one of my favorite superhero movies of all time, easily earning it the number 2 spot on this list. Number 1. Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2 is, in my opinion, an example of blockbuster filmmaking at its very finest. To quote Roger Ebert, who gave it one of his best reviews of 2004, Spider-Man 2 believes in its story, in the same way that serious comic readers believe, when the adventures on the page express their own dreams and wishes. It's not camp and it's not nostalgia. It's not wall-to-wall special effects and it's not pickled in angst. It's simply and poignantly a realization that being Spider-Man is a burden that Peter Parker is not entirely willing to bear. And I couldn't agree with that more. Though the Raimi films don't have my favorite version of Spidey himself, Spider-Man 2 is the movie in the franchise that is most interested in exploring who Peter Parker is. And that makes it the most satisfying film in the series for me. It also has the series' best villain, Dr. Otto Octavius, a really likable and tragic figure played with a depth that no other comic book villain had been given up on screen back in 2004. He's everything Amazing Spider-Man's Lizard is not, both interesting before and after his turn into villainy. And his sacrifice at the end? It's just so good. Michael Chabon, a Pulitzer Prize-winning author responsible for one of my favorite novels of all time, was such a huge fan of the character that he decided to sign on to write the movie. And the respect and love for the Peter Parker character that he brings to the script is really apparent throughout. Tobey Maguire may be a shaky Spider-Man, but he shines as Peter Parker here. Spider-Man 2 can be a very funny movie in that signature goofy Raimi style, but I think it's also one of the most mature superhero movies ever made. Not mature in the everything is grim and gritty sense, but actually mature in that it takes Peter Parker's plight seriously and has a script that's interested in exploring who he is as a character, not just what he can do as Spider-Man. Is it my favorite Spider-Man movie? Well, that's a tough one, but I think it is my favorite Peter Parker film. So I hope you enjoyed my picks, but let me know, what would you rank higher or lower? What are your personal rankings? Oh, and if there's any other franchises you'd like me to rank, be sure to let me know. Until then, be sure to like and subscribe and blah blah, and I will see you next week.
Pizza time.